The door opened. Daniel Matthews looked up from his mother's bedside, eyes raw from 72 hours without sleep, and saw the one person he never thought he'd see again. Allison Kerry stood in the doorway of the ICU room, white coat crisp, dark hair pulled back, tablet in her hands. Professional, composed, beautiful in a way that still made his chest ache, even after 9 months of trying to forget. Their eyes met. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Then her gaze dropped to the woman lying motionless in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from her arms, machines beeping their steady rhythm of still alive, barely alive, not for much longer. "Mr. Matthews." Allison's voice was ice. "I understand your mother needs surgery." Daniel's throat closed. Of all the hospitals in New York, of all the surgeons his mother's doctor could have called, the universe had a sick sense of humor. "Dr. Kerry is the best cardiovascular surgeon in the city," Dr. Patterson was saying beside her. "If anyone can save your mother, it's her." Allison moved into the room, professional mask firmly in place, reviewing charts and monitors without looking at Daniel again. But he saw it, that split second when her fingers had tightened on the tablet, when recognition had hit her like a physical blow. He destroyed her 9 months ago, sent a text message 2 weeks before their wedding. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." Then blocked her number like a coward. And now she was the only person who could save his mother's life. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, to beg. But Allison turned away, already discussing surgical options with Patterson. That's when he saw it. As she moved toward the monitors, her white coat shifted and the shape underneath became unmistakable. She was pregnant. 5 months, maybe more. Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him, and Allison, seeing him see it, lifted her chin slightly, defiant, daring him to ask. He didn't, couldn't. Because in that moment, standing in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and dying hope, Daniel Matthews realized 3 things. His mother was dying. The woman he'd never stopped loving hated him. And she was carrying someone else's child. Or was she? The fluorescent lights in Mount Mercy Hospital hummed the way they always did, a constant low buzz that got into your skull and stayed there. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and fear, that particular combination of bleach and human desperation that no amount of ventilation could ever fully erase. Daniel Matthews stood at the window of his mother's room, watching the city 15 floors below. Cars, traffic lights, people going somewhere. The world kept moving like it had somewhere to be. His mother hadn't opened her eyes in 48 hours. The machines beside her bed beeped in a rhythm that had become the only sound that mattered. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. Tubes ran from her arms, her mouth, disappearing into equipment Daniel didn't understand and couldn't fix. He was good at fixing things, built an empire out of solving problems other people couldn't see coming. But this was different. His hands shook when he reached for the coffee someone had brought him hours ago. Room temperature now, bitter on his tongue. He drank it anyway, just to have something to do. The door opened behind him. Dr. Patterson, the attending physician, stepped in with a tablet and that carefully neutral expression doctors wore when they had bad news but hadn't figured out how to say it yet. "Mr. Matthews." Daniel turned. "Tell me." Patterson hesitated. The pause said more than words. "We've tried everything we can with the current team. But there's a procedure, experimental, high risk, that might give her a chance. The problem is there's only one surgeon in the city I'd trust to perform it." "Then get them." Daniel's voice came out rougher than intended. "I don't care what it costs." "It's not about money." Patterson shifted his weight. "Dr. Kerry she's the best cardiovascular surgeon I've ever worked with. But she's very selective about her cases and—" He stopped. "And what? Nothing. I'll reach out to her." Daniel turned back to the window. Out there in the grey February cold, someone existed who could save his mother. That was all that mattered. He didn't sleep that night, just sat in the chair beside her bed watching the monitors, counting breaths. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from his assistant, his board members, people who needed decisions and signatures and his attention. He ignored all of it. Around 3 a.m., he found himself scrolling back through old photos, his mother at his college graduation, at the opening of his first office, at the charity gala, where she'd worn that blue dress and told him how proud his father would have been. And then, without meaning to, without wanting to, he scrolled too far back. 9 months. Not even a full year yet. There was a photo of Allison at a company dinner, laughing at something someone had said, her hand on his arm. She'd worn that black dress he'd always liked, the one that made her eyes look darker. They'd left early that night, couldn't keep their hands off each other in the cab home. He remembered the driver had gotten annoyed, kept clearing his throat. Daniel closed the photos, locked his phone, pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw spots. He'd ended it 2 weeks before their wedding, sent a text message like a coward. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. Take care of yourself." Blocked her number before she could respond, changed his routine so he'd never risk running into her, moved on. Except he hadn't. Not really. The morning came grey and cold. February in New York always felt like punishment. Daniel stood at his mother's bedside, holding her hand, the skin papery and thin, like if he squeezed too hard she might break. "Mum," his voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Please, you promised, you said you'd be there when—" He couldn't finish. The words got stuck somewhere between his chest and his mouth. The machines kept beeping. She didn't respond. Patterson returned around 9 with a woman Daniel didn't recognize. Late 50s, grey hair pulled back, wearing scrubs and carrying a coffee that smelled like the good stuff from that place on Amsterdam. "Mr. Matthews, this is Dr. Morrison. She's consulting on your mother's case." They discussed options, medical terms Daniel barely understood, percentages and risks and phrases like, "if we proceed and assuming she's stable enough." Morrison kept checking her watch. Everyone was busy. Everyone had somewhere else to be. "When will Dr. Kerry be here?" Daniel interrupted. Morrison and Patterson exchanged a look. "She's reviewing the case now," Patterson said carefully. "She'll make her decision within the hour." The hour crawled. Daniel paced the small room, each step measured by the beep of the heart monitor. He called his assistant, cancelled everything for the week. His board would be pissed. He didn't care, let them figure it out. His mother had raised him alone after his father died, worked 2 jobs to put him through private school, never complained, never asked for anything, just kept going, kept pushing, kept believing in him even when he was a fuck-up teenager who thought he knew everything. And when she'd gotten sick, when the diagnosis came down like a hammer, degenerative heart condition, time running out, he'd panicked, not the kind that showed, the kind that happened inside, quiet and cold, telling him everyone he loved would eventually leave. So he'd left first, cut Allison loose before she could watch him fall apart, before she could see him weak, before she could decide he wasn't worth the trouble. Coward. He was looking at his phone, no new messages, nothing that mattered, when he heard the door open again. Patterson stepped in first, followed by a woman in a white coat. She had dark hair pulled back, a tablet in her hands, and she was already reading the chart before she fully entered the room. Professional, focused. Daniel glanced up, ready to hear whatever medical assessment she had. And the world stopped. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense. It actually felt like time skipped a beat. Because the woman standing in his mother's hospital room, the one Patterson was introducing as Dr. Kerry, the brilliant cardiovascular surgeon who might be able to save his mother's life, was Allison. She'd looked up from the chart at the same moment. Her eyes met his. He watched the recognition hit her, watched her freeze just for a second, her knuckles going white on the tablet. Then her face went carefully blank, professional mask sliding into place. "Mr. Matthews." Her voice was steady, cold. "I understand your mother requires immediate surgical intervention." Daniel's throat closed. Words died before they could form. Patterson filled the silence. "Doctor, Kerry is the best in her field. If anyone can help your mother, it's her." Allison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She stepped closer to the bed, examining the monitors, checking IVs, doing doctor things while carefully avoiding looking directly at Daniel again. "I've reviewed her case," she said, addressing Patterson but clearly meant for Daniel to hear. "The procedure is risky. There's a 30% chance of complications, but without it, she paused, without it she has days, maybe a week. So you can help her. Daniel finally found his voice. Allison looked at him then, really looked, and in her eyes he saw everything. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal he'd caused. All of it right there, barely contained behind professional courtesy. I can try, she said. She turned to leave. Daniel took a step forward without thinking. Allison, Dr. Kerry, she corrected, not turning around. I didn't know you worked here. There's a lot you don't know about me anymore, Mr. Matthews. She reached for the door handle. That's when Daniel saw it. She'd angled her body away from him, one hand on her tablet, the other at her side. But when she turned, just that slight movement to push the door open, the white coat shifted. She was pregnant, visibly, unmistakably pregnant. Maybe 5 months along. The air left Daniel's lungs. Allison saw him see it, watched the realization cross his face. Her expression didn't change. I'll have my team prep for surgery, she said. Someone will brief you on the procedure. Then she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft click. Daniel stood alone in the room with his unconscious mother and the smell of hospital disinfectant and the sound of his own heart beating too fast. Patterson cleared his throat. I'll let you process. The surgery will happen tomorrow morning if she agrees to take the case officially. Daniel barely heard him leave. He sank into the chair beside his mother's bed, hands gripping his knees, trying to breathe. Allison was here, in the same building, pregnant, and she was the only person who could save his mother. Outside, the February sun tried and failed to break through the clouds. Down the hall, a call button buzzed. Daniel closed his eyes. This was going to be hell. Allison made it to the staff bathroom before her hands started shaking. She locked the door, gripped the sink, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked back. Same dark eyes, same high cheekbones, same woman who'd walked into that room prepared to do her job. Except her skin had gone pale, and her breath was coming too fast. Daniel Matthews, of all the hospitals in New York, of all the ICU cases she could have been assigned to review, the universe had a sick sense of humor. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Dr. Morrison. You good? Allison didn't respond. Wasn't sure what the answer was. She'd known this was possible. New York was a big city, but not infinite. Eventually, paths crossed. People ran into their exes at coffee shops, at galas, at mutual friends' weddings. She'd mentally prepared herself for that moment, practiced what she'd say, how she'd act. Cool, professional, unbothered. What she hadn't prepared for was seeing him broken. Daniel Matthews didn't break, not in the 2 years they'd been together. Not ever, as far as she'd known. He was the man who built empires, who walked into boardrooms and came out with deals that shouldn't have been possible, confident to the point of arrogance, always 3 steps ahead. The man in that hospital room wasn't that person. He'd looked hollowed out, desperate. Desperate in a way that came from watching someone you love slip away and not being able to do a damn thing about it. Allison hated that she'd noticed, hated that some traitorous part of her brain had registered the way his hands shook when he held that coffee cup. The stubble on his jaw like he'd forgotten to shave. The wrinkled shirt he'd probably been wearing for days. She turned on the tap, splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection blurred, then refocused. The baby kicked, a flutter low in her belly, like a reminder. Focus. You're a doctor. This is just another case, except it wasn't. The patient was Daniel's mother, Rebecca Matthews. Allison had met her exactly 3 times before everything fell apart. Warm woman, kind, the type who remembered little details about people and asked follow-up questions. She'd hugged Allison at Christmas dinner, told her she was so glad Daniel had finally found someone who made him smile like that. 2 weeks later, Daniel sent the text. Allison still remembered where she'd been when she got it. In the middle of a routine valve replacement, hands inside someone's chest when her phone had buzzed on the tray beside her. She'd glanced at it during a pause. Always did, in case of emergency. I'm sorry. I can't do this. Take care of yourself, just like that. No explanation, no conversation. Their entire relationship, 2 years of late nights and early mornings, of learning each other's rhythms, of planning a future, reduced to a text message delivered while she was elbow-deep in someone's thoracic cavity. She'd finished the surgery, saved the patient, then went home and cried for 3 days straight. Now standing in a hospital bathroom with his mother's life in her hands, Allison wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, or scream. One or the other. Her phone buzzed again. Morrison. Patterson says the family needs an answer. Can you take the case? Allison stared at the message. She could say no, should say no. There were other surgeons, other options. Let someone else handle the emotional minefield of operating on her ex-fiancée's dying mother while 5 months pregnant with a baby he didn't know existed. Except she'd read the case file, reviewed the scans, and Patterson was right. This was her specialty, the kind of high-risk experimental procedure that most surgeons wouldn't touch, but Allison had pioneered the technique, refined it, made it work when everyone said it was impossible. Rebecca had days left, maybe, but with the surgery, with Allison's hands and skills, and the years she'd spent perfecting this exact procedure, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe more. Allison pressed her palm against her stomach, feeling the baby shift beneath her hand. She thought about her own mother, about her brother, dead at 17 because an overcrowded ER couldn't see him in time, about every patient she'd ever lost and everyone she'd saved. She typed back, "I'll take it. Prep for tomorrow at 6 a.m. Morrison responded immediately. "You sure?" "No." She wasn't sure at all. "Yes," she typed. Then she pocketed her phone, fixed her hair, and walked out of the bathroom. The rest of the day passed in a blur of consults and prep work. Allison assembled her team, reviewed the procedure step by step, made sure every piece of equipment was perfect. This surgery would be 12 hours minimum, no room for error. She didn't see Daniel again, avoided the ICU wing entirely, sent residents to check on the patient instead. Cowardly, maybe, but necessary. It was past 8 when she finally left the hospital. The February cold hit her like a slap, wind whipping through the streets of the Upper West Side. She pulled her coat tighter, though it barely fit anymore, buttons straining over her stomach, and headed for the subway. The one train was packed. Rush hour had technically ended, but the train was still sardine-tight with people heading home late. Allison found a spot near the door, one hand on the pole, the other protecting her stomach from the crowd. She was exhausted. Between the pregnancy and the schedule she'd been keeping, she was running on fumes. A woman offered her a seat. Allison almost said no, stubborn pride, refusing to be seen as weak, but the train lurched and her lower back screamed in protest. "Thank you," she managed, sinking into the plastic seat. The woman smiled. "How far along?" "Almost 5 months." "Boy or girl?" "I don't know yet. Didn't want to know. It felt like tempting fate." The woman nodded knowingly, said something about her own kids, but Allison tuned it out, stared at the subway map above the windows without really seeing it. She'd found out about the pregnancy 2 months after Daniel ended things, had sat on the bathroom floor of her apartment in Carroll Gardens, staring at the positive test, trying to figure out what the hell to do. Call him? Tell him? Beg him to come back? Pride had won out, and fear. Fear that he'd come back out of obligation, not love. Fear that he'd look at her the way he'd looked at everything else in his life, like a problem to be solved, a responsibility to be managed. So she'd kept it to herself, made her plans. Doctor's salary was good. She could do this alone. Lots of people did. Didn't make it less terrifying. The train screeched into her stop. Allison hauled herself up, maneuvering through the crowd and up the stairs to street level. The walk to her apartment took 15 minutes, past the bodega where she bought coffee every morning, past the park where teenagers were still hanging out despite the cold, past the row of brownstones that always made her feel like she'd stepped into a postcard. Her place was a 2-bedroom walk-up on the 3rd floor. No elevator. She climbed the stairs slowly, keys already in her hand. Inside, the apartment was dark and quiet. She flipped on lights, dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes. Heat hissed through the old pipes. At least the building's ancient system was working tonight. Allison collapsed onto the couch, still wearing her coat. Sat there in the dim light from the kitchen, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back all day. She was going to have to face him tomorrow, going to have to walk into that OR knowing Daniel would be outside, waiting, hoping, his mother's life in her hands. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Allison closed her eyes. "I know," she whispered to no one. "I know." Daniel hadn't left the hospital. There was a fold-out cot in his mother's room that the nurses had brought in without him asking. He'd tried lying on it around midnight, but sleep was impossible. Just stared at the ceiling, listening to machines, counting beeps. Around 2 a.m., he gave up and moved back to the chair. His phone sat on the bedside table, screen dark. No messages. He'd texted his assistant earlier, "Handle everything. I don't care what it is," and she'd sent back a thumbs up. That was it. The board would be furious. There was a merger in progress, contracts that needed signing, investors who expected FaceTime. Daniel Matthews, the man who never took breaks, who answered emails at 3 in the morning and showed up to meetings other people would have cancelled for funerals. That man would have already been back at the office, delegating, controlling, making sure nothing fell apart in his absence. But sitting here, watching his mother breathe with the help of machines, Daniel couldn't remember why any of that had ever mattered. He'd built Matthews Technologies from nothing, 26 years old with a laptop, a trust fund from his father's life insurance, and an idea that everyone said was impossible. 10 years later, it was worth $3 billion. Still private, still his. He'd refused every buyout offer, every attempt to take it public. And for what? He couldn't buy his way out of this, couldn't negotiate or strategize or innovate a solution. His mother was dying, and the only person who could help her was the woman he'd destroyed. Daniel pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Every time he closed them, he saw Allison's face. The way she'd looked at him in this room, professional, cold, like he was a stranger. Except underneath that, he'd seen it, just for a second when their eyes met. She'd looked at him like he was something that hurt to see, and she was pregnant. Someone else's baby. Had to be. They'd been apart for 9 months. She'd moved on. Of course she had. Probably met someone better. Someone who didn't run away the second things got hard. The thought made him sick. He stood, paced to the window. The city lights spread out below like a circuit board. Allison was out there somewhere, sleeping. Or maybe not sleeping. Maybe lying awake like he was, thinking about tomorrow. The surgery. Patterson had explained it in detail. High risk. Experimental. The kind of procedure that could either save his mother's life or kill her on the table. But without it, she had days. So really, there was no choice. At 4 a.m., a nurse came in to check vitals. Young guy, tired eyes, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone on hour 10 of a 12-hour shift. "You should try to sleep," he said, adjusting an IV. "Can't." "Yeah," the nurse nodded. "Never can in these situations." He left. Daniel stayed at the window. The sun came up slow and grey. Another February morning in New York, cold and miserable. Daniel watched the city wake up, cars appearing on the streets, lights in buildings flickering on, people starting their days. His mother hadn't moved. At 5:30 a.m., Dr. Patterson returned with a team of residents. They moved around the room with quiet efficiency, prepping for transport to the OR. "Dr. Kerry's ready," Patterson said. "We'll be starting right at 6. Daniel nodded. His voice had abandoned him. "You'll be able to wait in the surgical wing. There's a family area. Someone will update you every few hours." "Okay," Patterson hesitated. "She's in excellent hands. Dr. Kerry—" He stopped himself, seemed to reconsider his words. "She's the best I've ever seen." Then they were wheeling his mother out. Daniel followed as far as they'd let him, to the double doors that led to the surgical wing. A nurse with kind eyes directed him to a waiting area down the hall. It was a depressing space. Beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, a TV playing morning news at low volume, coffee station in the corner, with the kind of coffee that tasted like burnt regret. There was a family already there. Older couple, holding hands, not speaking. Daniel took a seat far from them, pulled out his phone, stared at it without seeing anything. 6 a.m. came and went. In an operating room on this floor, Allison was cutting open his mother's chest. Daniel sat very still, hands gripping his knees, and waited. The OR was cold, always was. Allison had been doing this long enough that she barely noticed anymore, but today it felt sharper somehow, like the temperature had dropped just for this surgery. She stood at the sink outside the operating room, scrubbing her hands and forearms with methodical precision. 3 minutes, no shortcuts. The routine was almost meditative. Soap, water, scrub, rinse, over and over until her skin was raw and clean. Through the window she could see her team prepping. Morrison was already in there, along with 2 residents, an anesthesiologist and 3 nurses, all of them moving with practiced efficiency, setting up equipment, checking monitors, making sure every instrument was sterile and ready. Rebecca lay on the table, already unconscious. Small woman, fragile in the way that came from a body slowly shutting down despite every effort to keep it running. Allison finished scrubbing, backed through the door with her elbows, hands up. A nurse helped her into her gown, tied it in back. Gloves snapped on, mask secured. "Vitals?" Allison asked. "BP 90/60, the anesthesiologist reported. "Heart rate 52. We're keeping her stable, but barely." Allison approached the table, looked down at the woman who'd hugged her at Christmas dinner 9 months ago, who'd told her over wine and laughter how happy she was that Daniel had found someone who challenged him. "Don't think about that. She's a patient. That's all." "Scalpel," Allison said. "The surgery took 14 hours. It should have taken 12. But 20 minutes in, they hit the first complication, unexpected scar tissue from a previous cardiac event that wasn't in the records. Allison had to stop, reassess, approach from a different angle. Then, 6 hours in, Rebecca's blood pressure dropped dangerously low. They had to pause the procedure entirely, stabilize her weight. Allison stood there with her hands inside a woman's chest cavity, counting seconds, watching monitors, willing this body to keep fighting. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on." The numbers climbed, slowly, painfully slowly, but they climbed. "Okay," Allison said. "We're good. Let's keep going." Morrison gave her a look that said, "Are you sure?" Allison was sure. She'd come this far. Wasn't going to stop now. The next 7 hours passed in a blur of precision and focus. Every stitch had to be perfect. Every connection had to hold. This wasn't just surgery. It was engineering. Rebuilding a heart that had been failing for years. Allison's back screamed in protest. Her feet went numb around hour 9. The baby kicked occasionally, like a reminder that she couldn't just will her body to cooperate. She ignored it all, focused on the rhythm. Cut, clamp, suture, check. Over and over, Morrison handled the monitoring, calling out vitals, flagging any changes. The residents watched, learned, stayed silent. At hour 13, they hit another problem, bleeding that wouldn't stop. Allison clamped, cauterized, stitched, but the blood kept coming. "Pressure's dropping," that Morrison warned. "I see it. Allison, I see it." She worked faster. Hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Found the source. A tear in the arterial wall, small but significant. She patched it, reinforced it, checked her work. The bleeding slowed. Stopped. "Vitals stabilizing," Morrison announced. Allison let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. An hour later, she was closing. The final sutures went in with the same precision as the first. No rushing, no shortcuts. "Time?" she asked. 2:47 p.m., someone said. 14 hours. Jesus. "Okay." Allison stepped back from the table. "Let's get her to recovery. Monitor closely for the next 12 hours. Any change, I want to know immediately." The team moved into action. Allison stripped off her gloves, her gown, stepped out of the OR into the hallway. The exhaustion hit her all at once. Her legs nearly buckled. She caught herself on the wall, breathing hard. Morrison appeared beside her. "You need to sit." "I'm fine. You're 5 months pregnant, and you just did a 14-hour surgery. Sit." Allison let herself be guided to a chair, sat heavily. Her entire body felt like it was made of lead. Morrison handed her a bottle of water. "You did good in there, really good." Allison drank half the bottle without stopping. "We'll see. Next 24 hours are critical." "Still," That was some of the best surgical work I've ever seen. Allison didn't respond. She was too tired to feel proud or relieved or anything, except the desperate need to sleep for about 3 days. "The family's waiting," Morrison said gently. "You want me to talk to them?" "No." Allison forced herself to stand. "I'll do it." She made her way to the surgical waiting area, moving slowly. Each step felt like wading through concrete. The baby was quiet now, probably exhausted too. The waiting room appeared around the corner. Allison stopped in the doorway. Daniel was the only one there. He sat in a chair by the window, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He looked like he'd aged a decade since this morning. He must have heard her approach, looked up. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "The surgery's done," Allison finally said. Her voice came out rougher than intended. "She's in recovery." Daniel stood so fast he knocked his empty coffee cup to the floor. It rolled under a chair. He didn't notice. "She's alive, stable. The next 24 hours are critical, but she made it through." The relief that crossed his face was almost painful to watch. His whole body sagged, like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. "Thank you," he breathed. "Jesus Christ, thank you." Allison nodded, professional, distant. "She'll be in the ICU for at least a week, longer if there are complications. But if she continues to progress the way I expect, she should make a full recovery in 3 to 6 months. Can I see her?" "Not yet, she's still unconscious. We'll let you know when she's awake and stable enough for visitors." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. It was a gesture Allison had never seen him make before, something raw and unguarded. She hated that she noticed. "I don't know what to say," he said. "How to thank you. It's my job. It's more than that. You didn't have to take this case." Allison felt something sharp twist in her chest. "Your mother is a patient who needed surgery, that's all." "That's not—" He stopped, started again. "Allison, Dr. Kerry," she corrected automatically. His jaw tightened. "Dr. Kerry, can we please talk? Just for a minute?" Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to walk away, to maintain the professional distance she'd worked so hard to build over the past 14 hours. But she was too tired to fight, too wrung out to maintain the walls. "Fine," she said. "1 minute." There was a small consultation room off the waiting area, private, quiet. Allison led him there, closed the door behind them, leaned against it because she wasn't sure her legs would hold her up much longer. Daniel stood in the middle of the room looking lost, like he'd prepared a speech and now couldn't remember any of it. "I didn't know you were pregnant," he finally said. "Why would you? Is it—" He couldn't finish the question. Allison felt fury rise in her chest, sharp and hot. "Are you seriously asking me if it's yours?" We broke up 9 months ago, Daniel. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me. So no, it's none of your business." That wasn't really an answer. They both knew it. Daniel took a step toward her, stopped when she stiffened. "I'm sorry for how I ended things, for—" "Don't." Allison's voice came out harder than intended. "Don't apologize now. Not here. Not like this." "Then when? Because you won't talk to me, you won't—" "When did you want me to talk? When you sent me a text message 2 weeks before our wedding, when you blocked my number, when you made sure I couldn't reach you even if I'd wanted to." Her voice had risen. She forced herself to lower it. They were in a hospital. There were people outside. Daniel looked like she'd slapped him. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "For who? Certainly not for me. For both of us, I was—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "My mom got her diagnosis 3 weeks before the wedding. Terminal, 6 months, maybe a year, and I couldn't drag you into that, couldn't make you watch someone else die." Allison stared at him. "Someone else? Your brother. I knew what that did to you. I didn't want— You don't get to make that decision for me." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "You don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. We were supposed to be partners, Daniel. Partners talk about things, they don't just run." "I know. Do you? Because it seems like running is your default." Daniel flinched. "Good. Let him hurt." Allison pushed off the door, suddenly needing space, needing to move. I spent 2 years becoming someone you could trust, learning how to be with someone who lived the way you lived. And the second things got hard, you threw it all away. I was trying to protect you. I didn't need protecting. I needed you to be honest with me. The baby kicked hard. Allison pressed a hand to her stomach, breathing through it. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. Are you okay? I'm fine. You just did a 14-hour surgery while 5 months pregnant. You're not fine. It's not your concern. Whose baby is it? The question hung in the air between them. Allison could have lied, should have lied. It would have been easier, but she was too tired for lies. Yours, she said quietly. It's yours. Daniel went very still, like someone had hit pause on him. What? You heard me. But how? How do you think, Daniel? We were together for 2 years. We didn't exactly... She stopped herself. I found out 2 months after you left. Decided you'd already made your choice. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Just stood there, staring at her, mouth slightly open, processing. You've been pregnant for 5 months, he said slowly, and you didn't tell me. You blocked my number. You could have... What? Shown up at your office, sent a registered letter, hired a skywriter. Allison felt the anger rising again. You made it very clear you wanted me gone, so I was gone. I would have come back if I'd known. I didn't want you to come back out of obligation. It wouldn't have been obligation. Then what would it have been? Allison asked. Guilt? Duty? Some twisted sense of responsibility? That's not love, Daniel. That's not partnership. That's just you trying to control another outcome. She turned toward the door. This conversation was done. She couldn't do this anymore. Didn't have the energy. Wait, his voice cracked. Please. Allison stopped but didn't turn around. I fucked up, Daniel said. I know that. I've known it every day for the past 9 months, but this, he gestured vaguely. This is my child. Our child. Your mother needs your focus right now. That's what matters. You both matter. Allison did turn then, looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd loved her once, who'd promised her forever, and then ran when things got complicated. At the man who was now standing in a hospital consultation room, looking desperate and lost. I'm going home, she said. I've been awake for 36 hours. Your mother will be in recovery for at least 6 more. Someone will call you when she's ready for visitors. Can I call you later? We need to talk about this. I don't know. Allison? Dr. Kerry, she corrected again. In this hospital, I'm Dr. Kerry. That's the only way this works. She opened the door, stepped out into the hallway. Daniel followed. When can I see you outside of here? I don't know that either. You can't drop this on me and walk away. Allison turned, looked at him with exhausted eyes. Watch me, she said. Then she walked away, moving as fast as her tired body would allow. Down the hall, through the doors, gone. Daniel stood in the empty consultation room, staring at nothing. His mother was alive. He was going to be a father. And the woman he'd never stopped loving hated him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A nurse walked past with a chart. Daniel sat down heavily in one of the chairs. His phone buzzed. His assistant. Board meeting moved to Monday, everything else handled. He stared at the message without really seeing it. Everything else handled. If only. Allison didn't remember the subway ride home. 1 minute she was walking out of Mount Mercy Hospital into the cold February afternoon, and the next she was climbing the stairs to her apartment, legs shaking, vision blurring at the edges. She got inside, locked the door, dropped onto the couch before her body gave out entirely. The apartment was cold. She'd forgotten to adjust the thermostat before leaving yesterday morning. Or was it the day before? Time had lost meaning somewhere around hour 8 of surgery. She should eat something, drink water, take off these clothes that smelled like hospital and antiseptic, and 14 hours of standing. Instead, she just lay there, one hand pressed to her stomach, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. It's yours, she'd said. Why had she told him? She could have lied, could have let him believe it was someone else's. Would have been easier that way. But looking at his face, seeing the raw hope and fear and desperation, She hadn't been able to lie. Her phone buzzed, then again, and again. Allison ignored it, knew who it was without looking. Outside, the February sun was setting already. 4:30 and the sky was going dark. The streetlights came on, casting orange shadows through her curtains. A neighbor was cooking. She could smell garlic, onions, something rich that made her stomach growl. When had she last eaten? Yesterday? The day before? The baby kicked again, harder. "I know," Allison whispered. "I know. I'm sorry." She forced herself to sit up, then stand. Stumbled to the kitchen on autopilot. There was leftover Thai food in the fridge, 3 days old, maybe 4. She didn't care. Ate it cold, standing at the counter, barely tasting it. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Finally, she looked. 7 messages from Daniel. "Please call me, we need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can't leave it like this, Allison. Please, I just want to understand. Tell me what you need. Please." She stared at the messages. Part of her wanted to throw the phone across the room. Part of her wanted to call him back, let him grovel, let him explain. The smarter part knew better. She turned off her phone, dropped it on the counter, went to shower. The hot water felt like heaven. She stood under it for 20 minutes, letting it beat against her shoulders, her back, washing away the smell of the OR and the weight of the day. When she finally got out, her skin was pink and raw. She wrapped herself in the biggest towel she had, then just sat on the bathroom floor, too tired to move. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She'd had a plan. A good plan. Have the baby, take maternity leave, come back to work part-time. Her mom had agreed to move up from Savannah to help. Allison had already found a good daycare, started setting up the nursery in the 2nd bedroom. Single mom. Lots of people did it. She could do it. Daniel was never supposed to know. Except now he did, and everything was going to get complicated. The bathroom floor was cold. Allison forced herself to get up, to move to the bedroom, to put on pajamas, soft cotton pants, and an old t-shirt that barely stretched over her stomach anymore. She should sleep. Her body was screaming for it. But when she lay down, her mind wouldn't shut off. She kept seeing Daniel's face when she told him. The shock, the disbelief. Then, just for a second before she'd walked away, something that looked like joy. Allison rolled onto her side, stared at the wall. She'd loved him, really loved him. Not the easy butterflies and fireworks kind of love from movies. The real kind where you learned someone's rhythms. Where you knew how they took their coffee and what they looked like first thing in the morning and which side of the bed they preferred. She'd known Daniel was complicated, knew he had walls and defense mechanisms and a pathological need to control everything around him. But she'd thought she was different, thought she was the one person he'd let in. Turned out she was wrong. When he'd sent that text, when he'd blocked her number and disappeared, Allison had felt something break inside her. Not her heart. That was too simple. It was more fundamental than that. It was trust. The belief that someone could see all of her. The messy parts, the scared parts, the parts that still cried over her dead brother 10 years later, and choose to stay anyway. Daniel had looked at her and chosen to run, and now he wanted back in, now when it was convenient for him, when his mother's life depended on Allison's skills. The baby kicked. Allison pressed her hand to the spot, felt the movement beneath her palm. "Your dad's complicated," she whispered to her stomach. "He's brilliant and infuriating and scared of everything real. But he's your dad, and I don't know what to do about that." No response, of course not. Allison closed her eyes, tried to will herself to sleep. Instead, she found herself thinking about the surgery, about Rebecca lying on that table, so fragile and small, about the way Daniel had looked in the waiting room, desperate, broken, holding on by a thread. She'd saved his mother, done the job she'd trained for, the job she was good at. But what happened now? Sleep finally came around midnight, fitful, broken sleep full of dreams about operating rooms and crying babies, and Daniel's face saying please over and over. She woke at 6 a.m. feeling worse than when she'd gone to bed. Her phone was still off. She left it that way. Daniel spent the night in his mother's room. She'd been moved from recovery to the ICU around 8 p.m. Still unconscious but stable. The nurses said that was normal. that she'd probably wake up sometime in the next 12 hours. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her breathe. The surgery had saved her life, but she still looked fragile. Tubes and wires and monitors, same as before, just different numbers on the screens. His phone sat in his lap, dark. He'd tried calling Allison 7 times, texted even more. No response. Around 10 p.m. a nurse came in, different one than before, older woman with kind eyes and efficient hands. "You should go home," she said, checking his mother's vitals. "Get some rest, she won't wake for hours yet." "I'm staying." The nurse nodded like she'd expected that answer. "There's coffee in the break room. Real coffee, not the waiting room stuff. Second door on the left." "Thank you." She left. Daniel stayed. The hours crawled. He tried reading emails on his phone, but his brain refused to process words. Tried watching the news on the small TV mounted in the corner, but the sound grated. Ended up just sitting there, listening to machines beep, counting his mother's breaths. Around 2 a.m. his phone rang, his assistant, at 2 in the morning. Daniel answered. "What? Sorry to call so late, but the Singapore deal is falling apart. Chen is threatening to walk if you're not on the call tomorrow morning. Reschedule." "I tried, he says tomorrow or never." Then never. Silence on the other end. Then, "Daniel, this is a $40 million deal. I don't care." "You, what?" "I said I don't care. Tell Chen to do whatever he wants. I'm not coming in tomorrow." "But, handle it. That's what I pay you for." He hung up, dropped the phone on the bedside table. A $40 million deal. 2 months of negotiations. His board would lose their minds. He couldn't bring himself to care. His whole life had been about the deals. The next acquisition, the next innovation, the next victory. Building an empire. Proving he was worth something. Proving his father hadn't died for nothing. But sitting here, watching his mother fight for every breath. What was the point of an empire if you had no one to share it with? Around 4 a.m., exhaustion won. Daniel dozed off in the chair, head tipped back, neck at an uncomfortable angle. He dreamed of Allison, not the Allison from the hospital yesterday, professional, distant, angry, the Allison from before, from 9 months ago when everything was still good. He dreamed of their apartment in Tribeca. Sunday mornings when she'd sleep in and he'd make coffee, bring it to her in bed. The way she'd curl into him, still half asleep, pressing her cold feet against his legs and laughing when he yelped. He dreamed of the night he'd proposed, not elaborate, not planned, just the two of them in that apartment, snow falling outside, and Daniel realizing he didn't want to do life without her. She'd cried when she said yes, happy tears that made her eyes shine. He'd felt invincible in that moment, like he could do anything as long as she was beside him. Then his mother's diagnosis came, and the fear, and the voice in his head saying everyone leaves, everyone dies, don't get too close. So he'd run. Biggest mistake of his life. Daniel woke around 7 a.m. to find a doctor checking his mother's vitals. Young guy, couldn't be older than 30. "She's doing well," the doctor said. "Vitals are stable. Dr. Kerry's technique was remarkable." Daniel sat up, rubbing his neck. "When will she wake up?" "Could be any time now. Surgery like that. The body needs time to recover, but her brain activity is good. She should regain consciousness within the next few hours." The doctor left. Daniel moved to his mother's bedside. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know you can't hear me. Or maybe you can, I don't know how this works, but—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for not being here more, for always putting work first, for—" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "Allison saved your life. You remember her, right? Of course you do. You loved her. Said she was the best thing that ever happened to me." He laughed without humor. "You were right. About her. About everything." His mother didn't respond, just kept breathing steady and slow. Daniel stayed there all morning. Nurses came and went. Another doctor checked in. Patterson stopped by around 10, confirmed everything was progressing well, but Allison didn't come. Around noon, his mother's fingers twitched. Daniel shot forward in his chair. "Mom?" Her eyelids fluttered. Opened slightly. Closed again. "Mom, it's me, it's Daniel." She opened her eyes again. This time they focused on him. "Daniel, Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from the breathing tube. Relief crashed over him so hard he had to grip the bed rail. Yeah, it's me. You're okay. You had surgery, but you're okay. She tried to smile. It came out more like a grimace. Water. He grabbed the cup the nurses had left, helped her take small sips through a straw. How long? She asked. 2 days since the surgery. You've been unconscious, but the doctors said that's normal. She closed her eyes, seemed to be processing. When she opened them again, they were clearer. Allison? Daniel froze. What? Was Allison here? I thought... She paused, breathing hard. I thought I heard her voice. She's your surgeon. She saved your life. His mother's eyes widened slightly. She's here? In New York? Yeah. Have you talked to her? It's complicated. His mother made a sound that might have been a laugh. Everything with you is complicated. Did you apologize? Mom, did you? Daniel pressed his thumb and forefinger against his eyes. I tried. She's angry. She has every right to be. Then try harder. It's not that simple. It is that simple. His mother's voice was getting stronger. You made a mistake, a bad one. Now you fix it. She won't even talk to me. Then make her talk to you. God, Daniel, you run a billion-dollar company. You can figure out how to apologize to the woman you love. Loved, past tense. His mother gave him a look that said he was full of shit. You think I don't know you? I'm your mother. I know exactly how you feel about her. Same way you felt for 9 months. Daniel wanted to argue. He couldn't, because she was right. He'd never stopped loving Allison, not for a second. He'd just convinced himself it was better this way, safer, less painful in the long run. Except the pain hadn't gone anywhere, just changed shape. She's pregnant, Daniel said. 5 months. His mother went very still. Is it mine? Yeah. A smile crossed his mother's face, small but real. I'm going to be a grandmother. If she lets me anywhere near the kid, she will. You don't know that. I know Allison. She's angry, yes. Hurt, definitely. But she's not cruel. She won't keep you from your child. His mother closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. But you need to prove to her you're not going to run again. That you're in this, really in this. How? You'll figure it out. A nurse came in then, started fussing over equipment. His mother drifted back to sleep. The nurse said that was normal, that she'd be in and out for the next few days. Daniel stepped out into the hallway. The hospital felt different now, less like a tomb, more like just a building. People walking past with charts and coffee, someone laughing down by the nurses' station. His mother was going to live. He was going to be a father. And he'd driven away the only woman he'd ever loved because he'd been too scared to stay. Daniel pulled out his phone, stared at it for a long moment. Then he made a call. This is Daniel Matthews. I need to speak with a family law attorney. Yes, I'll hold. Allison knew she couldn't avoid him forever. She'd given herself 3 days. 3 days of throwing herself into work, doing rounds, checking on Rebecca through her residence instead of personally, staying in the surgical wing where Daniel wouldn't think to look. But she couldn't hide from her own patient indefinitely. On the 4th day after the surgery, she finally walked into Rebecca's room for a proper post-operative evaluation. Rebecca was awake, sitting up in bed, color returning to her face. The improvement was remarkable, a testament to both the surgery and her own resilience. Dr. Kerry. Rebecca's voice was still weak but warm. Come in, please. Allison approached the bed, reviewing the chart. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, then put back together with duct tape, but alive. Rebecca smiled. Thanks to you. The surgery went well. Your body is responding exactly how I hoped. Allison checked the monitors, made notes. Professional, clinical. We'll keep you here another few days for observation, but barring any complications, you should be able to go home next week. That's wonderful news, Allison nodded, kept her eyes on the chart. He's not here, if that's what you're wondering. Allison looked up. Excuse me? Daniel, he's at his office. First time he's left the hospital in 4 days. I practically had to threaten him to get him to go handle his business. That's not my concern, isn't it? Allison kept her expression neutral. You're my patient. Your recovery is my concern. Everything else is the father of your child sitting in that waiting room for 3 days hoping you'd come by. Allison went very still. He told you. He did. Rebecca gestured to the chair beside her bed. Will you sit, please, just for a minute? Every instinct told Allison to refuse, to maintain professional boundaries, to finish her rounds and get out before this conversation went somewhere she didn't want to go. But Rebecca's eyes were kind and tired, and she'd just had major surgery. Allison sat. Thank you, Rebecca said, for saving my life, for not letting your history with my son influence your medical judgment. I wouldn't do that. I know. That's what makes you remarkable. Rebecca shifted carefully in the bed, wincing slightly. But I also want to apologize for my son, for the way he ended things. It was cruel and cowardly, and I raised him better than that. You don't need to apologize for him. Maybe not. But I will anyway. Rebecca paused, gathering strength. He was scared. That's not an excuse, just context. When I got my diagnosis, Daniel completely fell apart inside. But he's like his father, my Daniel. Doesn't show fear, doesn't show weakness, just runs. Allison said nothing. I'm not asking you to forgive him, Rebecca continued, or to take him back, or anything really. Just, she met Allison's eyes. Just know that he loves you. He's loved you the whole time. He's just an idiot about showing it. Love isn't enough, Allison said quietly. Not when someone can't be honest with you. Not when they make unilateral decisions about your life because they think they know better. You're right, you're absolutely right, Rebecca smiled sadly. But I also know what it's like to be pregnant and alone. Daniel's father died when Daniel was 2. I raised him by myself, and it was hard. So hard. I can handle it. I don't doubt that for a second. You're one of the strongest women I've ever met. Rebecca reached out, touched Allison's hand lightly. But you shouldn't have to. Not if there's a chance. There's not. Okay. Rebecca withdrew her hand. Okay, I understand. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the city stretched out under grey clouds. February in New York, cold and unforgiving. He wants to be involved, Rebecca said. With the baby. He's terrified, but he wants to try. Allison stood. I should finish my rounds. Of course. Thank you again, Dr. Kerry. Allison left before the conversation could continue. Walked quickly down the hallway, back to the safety of the surgical wing. But Rebecca's words stayed with her. He loves you. He's loved you the whole time. It didn't matter. Love without trust was just noise. Daniel stood outside Allison's apartment building at 8 p.m. He'd gotten the address from hospital records. Probably illegal. Definitely unethical. He didn't care. The building was a brownstone in Carroll Gardens, the kind with character and history and stairs that would be hell to navigate with a stroller. Warm light glowed from a few windows. Piano music drifted from somewhere inside. Daniel pressed the buzzer for 3C, no answer. He pressed it again, still nothing. He was debating pressing it a third time when the front door opened. An older woman came out, arms full of grocery bags. Can I help you? She asked, eyeing him suspiciously. I'm looking for Dr. Kerry, Allison Kerry, in 3C. She a friend of yours? Something like that. The woman looked him up and down. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded toward the door. 3rd floor, but if you upset her, I'm calling the cops. She's pregnant, you know, doesn't need stress. I know, I'm not here to upset her. The woman humphed, not entirely convinced, but let him pass. Daniel climbed the 3 flights slowly, giving himself time to figure out what he was going to say. He'd rehearsed speeches in his head all day. None of them felt right. He reached 3C, stood there for a long moment, hand raised to knock. Before he could, the door opened. Allison stood there, arms crossed, not looking happy. I saw you on the street from my window. You going to stand out here all night, or are you coming in? Can I? She stepped aside. Daniel walked into her apartment. It was small but comfortable. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, furniture that looked lived in rather than expensive. There was a pile of medical journals on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the couch like someone had just gotten up. Home. It felt like a home. "How did you get my address?" Allison asked, closing the door but not moving further into the apartment. "Hospital records. That's probably illegal." Probably. She didn't invite him to sit, just stood there waiting. Daniel took a breath. "I want to be involved with the baby. I know I have no right to ask, but—" "No, you don't." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." Allison moved to the couch, sat down heavily. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and an old Columbia Medical School t-shirt. "What do you want, Daniel?" She sounded tired. Not angry, just tired. "You want joint custody? Your name on the birth certificate?" "What?" "I want—" He stopped, started again. "I don't know, I just know I can't. I can't not be part of this. You were fine with not being part of my life for 9 months. I wasn't fine. I was a coward." "At least we agree on that." Daniel moved closer, not quite sitting but not looming either, found a spot on the arm of a chair. "I told myself I was protecting you, that you'd be better off without me, that watching my mother die would be too much after what happened with your brother. That wasn't your choice to make. I know that now. Do you? Because it seems like you're still trying to make unilateral decisions. Showing up here, demanding to be involved." "I'm not demanding, I'm asking." Allison laughed without humor. "You tracked down my home address and showed up uninvited. That's not asking." She was right. Damn it, she was right. Daniel sat down properly in the chair, pressed his palms against his knees. "So I'm doing this all wrong, yeah. I don't know how to do this, how to—" he gestured vaguely, "how to be the person you need me to be. I don't need you to be anyone. But the baby does. Our baby needs a father. Our baby needs someone reliable, someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Someone who—" Her voice cracked slightly. She stopped, breathed, started again. "Someone who actually wants to be there. I want to be there. For how long? Until the next crisis? Until something scares you and you decide it's better to disappear?" Daniel leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I can't promise I won't screw up again. I can't promise I'll be perfect. But I can promise I won't run, not this time. That's not good enough. Then what is? Tell me what you need and I'll do it." Allison was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car horn blared, then faded. "I needed you 9 months ago," she finally said. "I needed you to talk to me instead of making decisions for both of us. I needed you to trust that I was strong enough to handle whatever came, but you didn't. You just left. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. "Then what does?" "I don't know." Allison looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "I don't know if anything can." They sat in silence. The apartment felt too small suddenly, too quiet. Finally, Allison spoke again. "The baby's due in early May, May 3rd, if everything goes to schedule. I've already set up everything. Daycare, pediatrician, my mum's moving up from Savannah to help. I have a plan. A plan that doesn't include me. A plan I can count on." That hurt more than it should have. Daniel stood. "Okay, I hear you. But I'm still asking. Let me be part of this, even if you can't trust me yet, even if you never trust me again. This is my child, too." Allison stood as well, one hand braced on her lower back. "I need to think about it. That's fair. And I need you to not show up here unannounced anymore. If we're going to do this, we do it properly, with boundaries." "Okay, whatever you want." She walked him to the door, opened it. Daniel stepped into the hallway, then turned back. "For what it's worth, my mother's right. I do love you. I've loved you the whole time. I'm just really bad at showing it." Allison's expression didn't change. "Love isn't the problem, Daniel. It never was." She closed the door. Daniel stood there for a moment, staring at the scuffed paint of her apartment door. Then he walked away. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Rebecca was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions for recovery. Daniel hired round-the-clock nursing care, made sure she had everything she needed. Allison did her follow-up appointments, pronounced Rebecca's recovery excellent, then stepped back to let other doctors handle the routine checkups. Daniel didn't show up at her apartment again, but he texted. Once a day, nothing pushy. Just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Mum's recovery is going well. Thank you again. Let me know if you need anything. Allison didn't respond. But she didn't block his number either. One evening, 3 weeks after the surgery, she was walking home from the hospital when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Dr. Kerry? This is Linda Chen. I'm a family law attorney. Daniel Matthews asked me to reach out regarding establishing a custody agreement and parental rights. Allison stopped walking. He what? Mr. Matthews would like to ensure everything is legally documented. He's proposing joint custody with you as the primary guardian, his name on the birth certificate, and a clear child support agreement. He wanted me to emphasize that he's not trying to take the baby from you, just to establish his rights and responsibilities as the father. Allison felt something twist in her chest. He hired a lawyer. Yes, he wants to do this right. If you'd like, I can recommend someone to represent your interests. I'll call you back. Allison hung up, stared at her phone. He'd hired a lawyer, was actually following through, doing it the right way instead of just showing up and demanding things. She didn't know whether to be angry or relieved. When she got home, there was a package waiting outside her door. Her name on it, no return address. Inside was a book. What to expect when you're expecting. Dog-eared and highlighted, and a note in Daniel's handwriting. I know you've probably already read this, but I'm reading it too, trying to catch up, trying to understand what you're going through. I'm on chapter 7, the one about the second trimester. Did you know the baby can hear sounds now? That seems both amazing and terrifying. I'm not trying to push, just wanted you to know I'm trying to learn, to be ready. Allison stood in her apartment hallway, holding the book, feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. Hope. Maybe. Just maybe. She sat down at her kitchen table and wrote a text. Coffee. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The wine bar on Court Street. They serve breakfast. She sent it before she could change her mind. The response came 30 seconds later. I'll be there 5 months later. September. The apartment in Tribeca had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Hudson River. Morning light poured in, warm and golden, catching dust motes in the air. Daniel stood at the window with his daughter asleep against his chest, one hand supporting her head, the other wrapped around her small body. She made little snuffling sounds in her sleep, sounds that had terrified him the first time he'd heard them, convinced something was wrong before Allison had calmly explained that babies just did that. Emma Grace Matthews, 6 weeks old, 7 pounds, 3 ounces at birth. Perfect. He'd been there for the delivery. Allison had called him at 3 a.m. when her water broke, and he'd driven to Brooklyn so fast he probably should have gotten a speeding ticket. Held her hand through 17 hours of labor, let her squeeze until he thought his bones would break, never once leaving her side. And when Emma finally came, red-faced and screaming, the nurse had placed her in his arms and Daniel had felt his entire world shift. This was what mattered. Not the deals or the board meetings or the empire. This tiny human who depended on him completely. Behind him he heard Allison stir in the bedroom. She appeared a moment later, hair messy from sleep, wearing one of his old t-shirts. She paused in the doorway, smiling at the sight of him with Emma. How long has she been asleep? 20 minutes. She woke up hungry. Did you feed her? Bottles in the fridge. She took the whole thing. Allison walked over, pressed a kiss to Emma's head, then leaned against Daniel's shoulder. They stood like that for a while, just watching the city wake up. Things weren't perfect. They'd spent months in therapy, individual and couples, learning how to talk to each other, how to trust again, how to be partners instead of two people trying to control outcomes. It was hard, some days harder than others, but they were trying. Allison had moved into the Tribeca apartment 3 weeks before Emma was born. Not because Daniel had pushed, but because she'd wanted to. Because it made sense. Because during those months of coffee dates and lawyers and honest conversations about fear and failure, they'd found their way back to something real. Your mum's coming over later, Allison said. She wants to take Emma to the park. She's too young for the park. She's too young to appreciate the park. Your mum just wants to show off her granddaughter. Daniel smiled. His mother's recovery had been remarkable. She was back to her old self, gardening, volunteering, spoiling her granddaughter absolutely rotten. She'd been right about Allison, about everything. Rebecca wants us to come to dinner Sunday, Daniel said. The whole family thing. Okay. You sure? Allison looked up at him. Daniel, we've been doing this for 5 months. Your mom loves me. I love her. We're good. I know, He stopped himself. Sorry, still working on not overthinking everything. She kissed his cheek. I know it's one of your more endearing qualities. Emma stirred, made a little sound of protest. Daniel adjusted his hold, swaying slightly. The motion seemed to settle her. I need to get ready for work, Allison said reluctantly. I have rounds at 9. She'd gone back to the hospital 2 weeks ago. Part-time for now. Working up to full-time over the next few months. Daniel had scaled back his own hours, worked from home more, made sure he was there for Emma, made sure he was there for both of them. I'll handle her, Daniel said. Go. Be brilliant. Save lives. Allison smiled, started to turn away, then stopped, looked back at him. I love you, she said. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. I love you too. She went to shower. Daniel stayed at the window with his daughter, watching the river, watching the light change as the sun climbed higher. This wasn't the life he'd planned. Wasn't the neat, controlled future he'd tried to build. It was better, messy and complicated and scary, but real and worth fighting for. Emma opened her eyes, that unfocused newborn stare that seemed to look through everything. Daniel smiled at her. Hey, little one, morning. She yawned, didn't cry, just looked at him with those dark eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. Your mum and I have a complicated history, Daniel said softly. I messed up, made a lot of mistakes, but I'm going to try really hard not to make those same mistakes with you. Emma made a sound that might have been agreement. I'm not perfect. I'm going to screw up sometimes, but I promise I'll always be here, always show up, always try to do right by you and your mom. The baby grabbed his finger, held on tight. Outside, the city was fully awake now. Cars and people and the constant motion of New York. Inside, it was just them, father and daughter, learning each other. Allison came back out, dressed for work, hair pulled back. She kissed Emma's head, then Daniel's lips. I'll be home by 4. Call if you need anything. We'll be fine. She grabbed her bag, started for the door, paused, looked back one more time at Daniel holding their daughter in the morning light. Thank you, she said, for not giving up, for fighting for this. Always, Daniel said. Then she was gone, and it was just him and Emma and the morning stretching ahead. He walked to the nursery they'd set up together. Pale yellow walls, a mobile of clouds and stars above the crib, a rocking chair by the window. Emma was starting to fuss. Diaper change, probably. Daniel laid her on the changing table, talking to her the whole time. So here's the thing about diapers. They're way more complicated than they look. Your mom makes it look easy. I'm still figuring it out. She kicked her legs while he worked, making little baby sounds. When he finished, she seemed content again. He sat in the rocking chair, Emma cradled in his arms, and just breathed. This moment, right here. This was everything. Not perfect, not a fairy tale ending, just real and trying and showing up every day. 3 years later, Emma ran through the playground in Prospect Park, pigtails flying, her little voice shrieking with laughter. She'd just discovered the slides and was convinced they were the greatest invention in human history. Daniel sat on a bench nearby, watching. Allison sat beside him, their second daughter, Lily, 8 months old, asleep in a stroller. Think we should tell her she can't actually fly off that slide? Allison asked. Give her a minute, she'll figure it out. Emma did not figure it out. Went face first into the mulch at the bottom, popped up immediately, undeterred, and ran back to do it again. She's definitely yours, Allison said. What's that supposed to mean? Stubborn. Refuses to admit defeat. We'll keep trying the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Daniel laughed. That's not true. Allison just looked at him. Okay, maybe it's a little true. They'd gotten married a year ago. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Nothing like the big wedding they'd planned years ago. This one had been theirs, real and imperfect and perfect because of it. Daniel had taken his company public 6 months later, finally agreeing to what his board had been pushing for years. Made him stupidly wealthy, though he tried not to think about it too much. Allison still worked at Mount Mercy, now head of cardiovascular surgery. They'd bought a house in Brooklyn, something with a yard and space for the girls to grow. It wasn't easy. They still fought, still had days where old fears crept in, still went to therapy once a month to make sure they kept talking instead of shutting down. But they'd learned, they'd grown, and they'd shown up every day, for each other and for their daughters. Emma came running back, breathless and covered in dirt. "Daddy, did you see? I went really fast." "I saw. You were amazing. Can we get ice cream? Did you ask your mom?" Emma turned those big eyes on Allison, the same eyes that got her whatever she wanted. "Please?" Allison pretended to consider. "I suppose, but you have to help me with Lily." "I will. I'm a good helper." They walked to the ice cream truck at the edge of the park. Emma held both their hands, swinging between them. Daniel looked at his family, his wife, his daughters, this life they'd built together, and felt grateful. For second chances. For the courage to try again. For every hard conversation and every moment of vulnerability that had led them here. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It was so much better. Thank you for reading. Life doesn't always give us perfect endings. Sometimes it gives us second chances. Sometimes it gives us the opportunity to fix what we broke, to show up when we didn't before, to choose love over fear. Daniel and Allison's story wasn't about a perfect romance. It was about two people who made mistakes, who hurt each other, who learned the hard way that love alone isn't enough. You need trust, communication, and the willingness to keep showing up even when it's hard. They found their way back to each other not because it was easy, but because they both decided to try, to be honest, to do the work. And sometimes that's what real love looks like, not fireworks and grand gestures. Just two people, day after day, choosing each other, building something real, something that lasts. A question for you. If you were in Allison's position, would you have given Daniel a second chance? What would it have taken for you to trust someone again after they left? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective.